Anybody got anything they want to say directly to me?
You did say at the end of your event, I just don't feel supported by the group. And then that's when I was like, well, yeah, because...
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's your girl, the Brooke Ashley, and today we are here to discuss The Real Housewives of Atlanta, Season 16, Episodes 14 and 15. Yes, it's a double recap, but before we get started, let me just say, it feels good to be back. I missed y'all. If you don't know, I was in London. I saw Beyonce again. And when I tell y'all, I think that I will only see Beyonce in Europe now going forward, because I honestly feel like Beyonce gave London a better show than she did MetLife. I'm just saying, Miss Mamas did that, okay? And yes, I did get a London shirt at the merch station, and I'm not going to show it to y'all because the way y'all made fun of me when I got my New York shirt, I was super geeked for that. But yes, I got some merch. Now, to my UK girlies, I promise you the next time I touch down in London, I will be doing a meet and greet. But when I tell y'all London is such a fabulous city, I said, oh, I don't want to leave. Like, I was this close to saying, let's extend this trip. But I had an amazing time. It was a nice family trip. My mom, my sister, my brother, we had a time. But we are back in the fold, and I am here to talk about these housewives, girl. Let's get into it. Shamea and Kelli, I will be whacking y'all because you guys both tried it. And it really hurts my heart because I went up for y'all both at the beginning of this season. And for the last 4 or 5 episodes, you guys have both been clicking down. And Shamea, it's no shade, sis, but you might have been better off being a friend of and not full-time. And we'll talk more about that later on. The way you did Brit Edie at the table about the donations, I said right message, wrong time, and the passive-aggressive behavior, girl, what are we doing? Miss Kelli, girl, we need to talk. I need to whack you a few times because the switch up, no ma'am. And I'm sorry, Kelli, but you look funny in the light. You look two-faced. And it's also giving social climber. You want to connect with who you feel is the wealthiest. And now you want to ditch your best friend Brit for greener pastures, aka Shamea. But y'all, I have quite a bit to say about both of the episodes. And without further ado, let's get right on into it because you guys already know that we don't have a minute to spare. Now, just a quick disclaimer, you know that it's a double recap, so I'm not going over every single scene, only the most important scenes. So if I miss anything, we can talk about it down below. And also, a girl is still jet lagged, so we might be breezing through a lot, okay? So we open up episode 14 with it being day 2 of the ladies in Grenada. It's the next morning. Everybody's getting ready for the day. And they're also talking about what happened last night. So we see Drew and Cynthia talking about how Brit Edie got super drunk. She's a lightweight. They had to pull the van over so she could throw up on the side of the road. And now we cut to Brit Edie on FaceTime with her husband, and she's telling him how she got very ill from all the shots. So now we cut over to Angela. She's in her room trying to FaceTime Charles because it's their wedding anniversary and she wants to talk to him. Now, I'm not going to hold you guys. We can skip past this short scene because y'all know how I feel about their marriage, their whole dynamic. It's a no for me.
No.
So now we jump on over to Brit and Phaedra having breakfast in their villa. And when I tell you that breakfast looked amazing, the chefs on this vacation did their biggest one because all of their meals looked so good. So now Kelli comes out to join them. And Phaedra's like, ooh, Kelli, you need some nipple covers. I have some in my drawer, go get some. So now we cut to Phaedra's confessional, and Phaedra's throwing shade about how Kelli's breasts are just so big and how she's about to topple over. Now, is it just me or does it feel like Phaedra has a fixation on Kelli's boobs and her height? Because the constant shade about Kelli being so short, calling her a strawberry shortcake and a garden gnome, I'm just like, girl, you're also short too. Phaedra is like, what, an inch taller than Kelli? So I'm not getting the short jokes either. And then the talk about her breasts being too big, I'm just like, well, isn't that everybody on the cast? Because everybody on the cast has gotten their boobs done. So why this fixation on Kelli? I don't know, but Phaedra has a lot to say in that confessional. So now Cynthia comes out to join them for breakfast, and she addresses how Brit was throwing up the night before due to all the drinking. So Phaedra's like, oh yeah, it affected her so much that her nipple was inverted. And now we cut to Brit's confessional where she states that shots are for college girls and we are all wives. Well, at least some of us are. And I said, Brit, stop. I said, girl, there are plenty of wives and mothers who have a shot every now and again. I think that you just have a low tolerance for alcohol and that's fine. Most people do. I think that whether you drink a mixed drink, a shot, is going to affect you just the same. So now Shamea joins them. We find out that she still has not gotten her luggage. They can't even track it. I said, excuse me, come again? And you know that Shamea has all her designer pieces in there. So it would be a real problem if they couldn't track the luggage. Because again, what do you mean you can't track it? So one of the producers goes on to ask Shamea, what is she doing about the underwear situation? And Shamea's like, what underwear? I'm bare and naked. Now, Miss Shamea, you have the resources. You can go to the nearest store and get some clothes, get some underwear to help you while you have to wait for your luggage. Because that's what I would be doing. So now Shamea gives everybody the itinerary for the day. And she says, today's going to be fun. We're splitting up into 2 groups. My group is going to be me, Cynthia, Portia, and Phaedra. We're going to the waterfall. And the rest of y'all, which will be Kelli, Angela, Drew, and Brit, y'all will be cooking with Kelli in Grenada. I forgot what Kelli said at this moment, but Phaedra points out how loud Kelli is. She's like, if Tinkerbell and a garden gnome got together, like she's just so loud. And I was just thinking, everybody in this group has loud voices, and as a girl with the loud voice herself, I get it. Also, Phaedra, you were on the show with Miss Nene Leakes. Nobody is louder than Nene. So if you could deal with Nene, you can deal with Kelli. So now Cynthia jumps in and she's like, well, when it comes to me, one thing I can't take is the over talking in this group because I actually want to hear what everybody has to say. So now Kelli jumps in and she's like, well, did the crystal help from last night? And now Brit jumps in and says that she had the crystal last night, but nobody wanted to listen to her. So now Shamea jumps in and she addresses how Brit brought up something that wasn't even relevant to the conversation, and that's why nobody paid her any mind. So Brit's like, well, you can't tell me what to talk about when I have the floor. And now Brit and Shamea get into it, and Shamea doubles down and she says, well, why would you bring up Apollo, Phaedra's ex? We weren't talking about that. We all wanted to know who Black was. So, of course, we know that Portia accused Drew of seeing some guy named Black, and Drew denied it. So now we cut to Drew's confessional, and she says, everybody's so curious about what I have going on, but the real question is, why do Shamea and Brit have all this friction? I'm not going to hold you guys. I wasn't that interested in this whole argument between Shamea and Brit because who cares? Like, I don't care to talk about Apollo and why Brit brought him up in the first place. It's just not that interesting. So I was ecstatic when Kelli broke up their argument. She was like, okay guys, the vans are here. Let's split up into groups and let's go. So now we see Shamea, Portia, Cynthia, and Phaedra in their Sprinter van. And on their way to the waterfall, they're talking about the drama that happened a few minutes ago between Shamea and Brit. So Shamea's like, I wasn't trying to read Brit. She's so defensive all the time. And it's like, nobody's being shady. So now Portia says, yeah, I've noticed that Brit has been kind of snippy with you. I think it's about the whole drinking thing. And now we cut to a flashback of last night where Brit's like, I can't do any more shots. So now the conversation takes a turn and Shamea brings up the donations. And she says, I want to have a conversation with Brit about her donations because you can't show up in a Rolls Royce and a Birkin on your arm and show up with a small box. Brit only had 3 rolls of toilet paper in her box. So now Shamea continues on and says that she did speak to Brit and told her that those donations were not okay. And so Brit told her, okay, that's fine. I'll send cash. So Shamea says that Brit sent $250 via Cash App And Phaedra jumps in and she's like, $250? Nobody should have given anything less than $1,000. $250 is unacceptable. We're women at a certain level. We spend that money on our nails. Now, let me just stop right here because I want to address several things, right? Brit's donations were unacceptable. Full stop. But Shamea, I have to get on you quickly because it's giving mean girl and it's giving messy. And it feels like you want to embarrass Brit. You said a few minutes ago, I want to have a conversation with Brit about those donations because it's not right. It looks crazy. You don't do that. You can't drive a Rolls Royce and have a Birkin on your arm and only donate some toilet paper. Then in the next breath, you say, well, I did talk to her about those piss poor donations and she sent $250 via Cash App. The fact that you've now admitted that you did speak to Brit is showing that you want to make her look bad. You already spoke to her about it. She sent you some money. Let's move on. Because now it looks tacky and gauche on your part to smear her name about these donations. And we're going to talk about this more because I feel like you tried it at that dinner table. Now, I'm in full agreement with Phaedra about at a certain level, donations should be $1,000 and up. Don't fight me on that. I'm not trying to be controversial, but if you've been blessed financially, if you can spend 10, 15 grand on purses, shoes, jewelry, travel, then you can afford to make a generous donation for people who are in need, right? So when Phaedra said anything less than $1,000 is unacceptable at this level, Phaedra might not be my favorite housewife, but I can always give the girls their tens when they're right. Like I said, I don't think that Brit has it. I think that Brit is full of stunts and shows, and she's faking like she does have it like that. And that's why they only got 3 rolls of toilet paper and $250. So now Cynthia's asking Shamea, what did Kelli think about her bestie's donations? And Shamea's like, she thought the same thing that I thought, that it wasn't right. So now the conversation turns to Drew, and Phaedra's like, I'm trying to figure out everybody's names in this group, Drewzilla. And I said, I asked this in the last recap, but can somebody let me know what is Phaedra's issue with Drew? It's really weird. It's giving hater because I'm not understanding why she's always shading Drew every chance she gets. It's really weird to me. I've always felt like Phaedra could be really nasty. Since the time she came on this show, I was never here for her attitude. I could never get into that nice, nasty, churchy, child, ooh, Lord, you know, all that. It's just like, girl, can you give us something else, please? You came back for a Sweet 16 to give us more of the same? A few one-liners and confessional shade? Really? That's the best you can do? So now Portia says, well, I can't talk about Drew because we made up last night. And now Portia says that Drew should apologize to Shamea for calling her a lapdog. And I said, well, Shamea owes Drew an apology for how she showed out at that radio station talking about Drew the whole time, calling her a liar on the radio. So where's Drew's apology? I'll wait. I'm getting really tired of this whole let's gang up on Drew. It's just giving that they all view her as the punching bag, and it's not landing. Because if we're being honest, Drew has been carrying this season on her back. Because without Drew, there would be no storylines. She's been the storyline. Shamea, you continue to show us why you've been a big letdown as a full-time housewife. When you sat up in your confessional and just lied, for you to fix your mouth and say, every time I ask people if they know who Drew is, they ask who? They have no idea, and I'd rather be a lapdog than be forgettable. I said, Shamea, girl, we don't have to sit up here and lie like that. We all knew who Drew Sidora was before we knew who you were. And quiet as it's kept, Shamea, a lot of folks still don't know who you are. I mean, why are we lying like this? Drew's been on TV for 2 decades. We all knew who she was. And Shamea, you set yourself up with that because the way everybody roasted you on social media, and they were like, well, girl, you're both. You're a lapdog and forgettable. So there's that. Again, Shamea, this one-sided beef that you have with Drew is just weird, and you look goofy. because I'm not understanding what has Drew done to you that you're just so upset with her. So now Phaedra jumps in to throw more shade at Drew, and she's like, you come out here looking like Betty Rubble from the Flintstones. They're all like, oh my gosh, Phaedra, stop. I said, Phaedra, do you forget that we remember what you looked like before when you first joined the show? What were your fashions giving? I'll wait. You were giving us church lady realness. Very frumpy, no style at all. So for you to sit up there and shade Drew about her fashions, I'm just like, okay, Phaedra, I guess. And I don't know if you guys think this, but I personally feel like this has been Drew's best season with the fashions, the looks, the hair. She looks phenomenal this season. And I also felt bad because we cut to the other van and Drew's like, oh, I like Phaedra. Getting to know her has been so much fun. She seems so cool. And I said, Drew, if you knew what she was saying about you in her confessionals and to the other women, I don't think you would be saying how cool she is. And I really hope that Drew reads Phaedra down at this reunion too, because again, I'm confused as to why Phaedra has all this hate towards Drew. It's weird. So now we jump right back over to Portia, Shamea, Phaedra, and Cynthia, and they're asking Phaedra how she feels about Angela. And Phaedra's like, I can't get a good read on Angela. And then she says, but I know her husband though, Charles is too much fun. And I said, what does that mean? Are you intimidated by Angela? Is that what it is? Because this shade towards her is also really strange. And this fixation on her husband is also weird. Do you have a crush on Charles? Did you and Charles used to date? And you feel a way that he married Angela? Because again, I'm not getting it. The constant put downs about Angela's looks and her age is just really bizarre. So now one of the producers goes on to ask Phaedra if Charles acts like he's married. And of course, Phaedra is backpedaling and stuttering. She's like, well, I don't know because I wasn't on the scene like that, but I had no idea that he was married. And I said, Phaedra, don't play in our faces. You're obviously insinuating that there's something else going on in their marriage and that Charles Oakley does not act like a married man. But Shamea reminds them that the Prime Minister is coming to join them for dinner and they can't be late. And then Portia jumps in saying that, tell that to Drew because even though she can be late, Drew is even later. And I said, now, Portia, you were 2 hours late to your best friend's birthday, so I don't know about Drew being later than you. So they're at the waterfall taking pictures, having a good time. And now we jump on over to the second group, Kelli, Drew, Angela, and Brit at their cooking class. So they're at this private house. There's a private chef. The table is set up beautifully, just beautifully done, right? So they're all enjoying their meal. And Kelli says, this is so cool. It really feels like a reset. And Brit says, yeah, I have to agree, despite having a lot of drama with Angela and Drew. But Brit does add that this trip has been refreshing. And I said, girl, just wait until tonight because you get into it with Shamea and Portia at dinner, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So anyhow, we cut back to everybody else at the waterfall. And Phaedra says, I'm getting to know Brit. She seems cool. But I thought it was weird when she brought Apollo up because how did he even get in the conversation? And now Portia points out how Brit feels unsupported by the group and she feels hurt. Now, when it comes to that, that's on Brit. That's her fault. She's done a poor job with getting to know everybody in the group. And with what happened in the first 5 episodes of this season, the constant talking about Kenya, blowing that whole thing out of proportion, there was no way for anybody to get to know her. So that's Brit's fault for why she feels iced out of the group. And I'm not even saying this with any shade this time around, but I really feel like this is not the show for Brit. Brit was better off on Love and Hip Hop, Zeus, like that's more her speed. And then with this stupid lawsuit that she has against Bravo, just a hot mess. So Portia points out how Brit has not made an effort to get to know anybody in the group. And then she says, get to know us first. And now Phaedra points out how in this group, you have to make an effort to get to know people if you want folks to be receptive to you. And again, I can always give the girls their 10s. Phaedra is correct. There has to be some reciprocity. It can't be you whining about nobody reaches out to you, but you don't reach out to them. Especially on these shows with these dynamics, you're going to really have a hard time if you don't ever pick up the phone and call your castmates and try to build a friendship. So now we cut right back to the other group, and Kelly's like, I have a question for Drew. Do you know who this person is? And she's holding up a black napkin, and she's trying to reference Black. So now Brit starts questioning Drew, and she's like, have you been dealing with Black? Is there any flirtation going on? And Drew says, dealing with him? No. Hanging out? Yes. And then she says, a flirtation, yes, absolutely, but nothing more. And I said, Brit, why are you questioning anybody? Because we the people want to know, does your husband have gainful employment? What does he do for a living? Let's talk about that. You're trying to get the tea from Drew. Let's talk about you and your husband, Mike. But Drew makes it clear that she's not seeing anybody, she's not in love, and that when that day comes, she will gladly tell everybody. So now everybody's back at the villas to get ready for the dinner. Can somebody explain to me why they always eat so early on Housewives? They eat dinner on vacations at like 7 p.m. and I just couldn't do that. I don't know about y'all, but I like to eat late on vacations. I feel like you need that time to get ready, recalibrate, take a nap, make sure that you have enough time to do your makeup and just have some fun getting ready. Like, give me a 9 or 10 p.m. reservation. Do not make any 7 or 8 p.m. reservation, especially on vacation. I like to eat late. That's just me though. We're gonna skip right past Angela on FaceTime with Charles. Y'all know how I feel, and I'm gonna leave it right there. And I still stand by my thoughts about she is always making excuses for the way he treats her. And personally, I feel like she's trying to convince herself that everything is okay. And I'm gonna just leave that right there and move right on along. So now we jump over to Shamea and Kelli's villa, and they have Brit and Cynthia there too, and Shamea is pouring up some shots. Now, Shamea, I have to whack you again, because what is this passive-aggressive behavior about Brit not wanting to take a shot? When you said, I don't want to pressure anybody into taking a shot, and I just said, somebody else's drinking preferences should not piss you off. I don't know why you're so bothered. If you want to take a shot, then take a shot. But being all shady and being all nasty, it was just weird. And Brit clocked it. She was like, I don't understand this passive-aggressive behavior that Shamea is harboring towards me. It's really strange. So now Brit and Shamea get into it. And Brit's like, Shamea keeps screaming out shot o'clock every other minute. And I'm like, we're not hood rats, we're classy women. Now, Brit, classy women have food at their events. So not too much. I'm with you when you're right. Because Shamea is wrong for how she's being really shady about you not wanting a shot. But let's just hold on for just a minute, because Miss Mamas, that event that you threw was sorry. And the fact that the country club is suing you for non-payment, allegedly, not too much about what classy women do versus what hood rats do. And if we're being honest, folks from the hood feed folks. What you did was just trifling. So again, girl, not too much. So they arrive at the restaurant, they all sit down, everybody looks lovely, and now Kelly's asking about how their days went, right? Because they were split up into two groups. One group went to the waterfall, and the other group cooked with Kelly. So the waterfall crew says they had so much fun, they had a great time, and now Portia goes on to ask the other group, how was their cooking class? So Kelly says, oh yeah, it was really fun. It was a great time. And then she brings up that the home they were at was also affected by the hurricane. So in a roundabout way, Kelly brings up the donations, and she goes on to say, I'm not saying that we were going to be able to help them, but it got me thinking about how we all gave, and I want to thank all of you guys for your donations. So Portia jumps in and says that she's always happy to give, and then she says that as women who do well for themselves, she gave $1,000. Now, kudos to Portia for giving $1,000, right? That's a generous donation. Happy to hear it. But I was always taught when you give to charity, you don't speak about it to anybody. That's between you and the good Lord, right? And the organization that you sent the money to. I just thought that was in really poor taste to say, oh yeah, because I sent $1,000. And it's clear that you're only saying how much you gave because you are determined to bash Brit. And now Shamea jumps in, and Shamea, here's where I have to just whack you again. Because if you're going to say something, then say it with your chest. You were obviously talking about Brit. And when Brit called you out about, hey, this feels shady, you want to sit up there and play semantics and play dumb. No, ma'am. You were talking about Brit, just own it and stand 10 toes down in it. And that's my issue with you, Shamea. Low-key throwing rocks and then hiding your hands when you're called out. So Shamea says, if you're able to give big, then this is where you do your big one. And yes, I agree with that. Hands down, she's correct. If you've been blessed, be a blessing to somebody else. I get that. But Shamea, here's where you lost me. You could have had this conversation with Brit in private. It was clear that you were trying to embarrass her in front of the group. So Shamea goes on to say, we can't pull up with Rolls Royces and Birkins on our wrists and not give big. And again, I agree with that. But Shamea, right message, wrong time. And now Brit calls out the shade, and Shamea's like, you think I'm throwing shade at you? And I said, yeah, Shamea, because you are. I would have said, Brit, yes, I am talking about you. Your donation was horrible. It was real cheap, real lousy. You could have done better. I'm not going to sit up there and be passive aggressive and play these games when it's clear that I'm talking about you. So now Brit says, well, that whole thing that you said about pulling up in Rolls Royces and Birkins, that's me. So Shamea says, well, I have a Rolls Royce and so does Portia. Like, you're not the only one. And I said, Shamea, stop. You know good and damn well that you were throwing shade at Brit. Just own it. So Brit's not here for this, right? She's like, Shamea, what's your issue with me? And now Kelli jumps in and she says, was Brit's donation the best? No, but obviously she's unaware of what to give. I said, ooh, the shade of it all. Your so-called best friend is throwing you under the bus, saying that you're unaware, tacky, and cheap. I said, well, damn. So Brit even clocks that Kelli's not giving best friend vibes. And now she addresses Shamea. She says, Shamea, we spoke one-on-one and I asked you and you told me to give whatever I wanted to give. Was that not spoken? And Shamea says, calm down, Brit, like calm down, relax. And I said, now Shamea, you sat up there trying to embarrass her and then trying to play in her face like you're not doing that. I'm sorry, but I just don't like that. I can't respect that. Stand in your shade. If you want to be shady, then just say I'm being shady. But don't sit up here and try to gaslight her when you're clearly talking about her. So Brit and Shamea are still going at it. And Brit's like, Shamea, you're being very passive-aggressive right now. So now we cut to Shamea's confessional where she reveals that she took Brit out to Houston's in Atlanta and she told Brit that those donations were not acceptable. It just feels like you're going out of your way to embarrass her, and that's going to always be really lame to me, in my opinion. I don't have to like a housewife for me to point out the obvious. And I'm sorry, Shamea, but you're clicking down for me. Because again, you already talked about this in Atlanta. To bring this up a week later on the trip, what are we doing? So Brit's obviously annoyed and she's like, does anybody else want to address anything with me? And now Portia jumps in and addresses how Brit feels like nobody in this group supports her. And we find out that Brit's really angry because Portia does not have her number saved. Now, Brit, the fact that you skipped out on this reunion and you are suing the network for $20 million, you can rest assured that nobody in this group has your number saved. Just so we're clear. Like, you've burned all the bridges. So as they're going back and forth, Shamea's like, oh my gosh, guys, put a pin in this. The prime minister is here. Like, just stop. So the prime minister pulls up, and when I tell you, all the ladies, for the most part, were crushing on him. They were all flirting with him. They're asking if he's single, if he has kids. We find out that he has 2 kids, a 17-year-old, and I forgot how old the other child was, but they're all like, wait, you have a 17-year-old? You don't look old enough. So now we cut to their confessionals, and the producers asking each woman, who do they feel would be the best first lady in this group? And of course, Phaedra is throwing shade at Drew yet again. I said, Drew lives in your mind rent-free, because I don't understand how we're talking about who could be the first lady of Grenada and you're throwing shade at Drew for no reason. So Phaedra says, well, if Drew wants to be the first lady of Grenada, she needs to take off that Timu dress because it's offensive. I said, your first 5 seasons on The Real Housewives of Atlanta, you looked a mess. And you have the audacity to talk about Drew and her style. Let me stop. Let me just leave it right there. But yeah, I think it's so funny that she's constantly throwing shade at Drew for no reason. Kelli throws some slight shade saying that Portia loves her a foreigner, and Angela says that she sees a connection between Kelli and the Prime Minister. So they all toast with the Prime Minister and then he leaves. Now I have to say, he seemed like a really cool guy, a good vibe, very friendly, and he had a great time with them. So now Portia points out that he might be single with 2 kids because she didn't see a ring. So now Brit points out that there are some married men who don't wear rings. And now Angela jumps in and reveals that Charles does not wear his wedding ring. Now Angela, a lot of us, including your castmates, have a side eye for your marriage. I don't think that it's in your best interest to reveal that piece of information, but that's just me. And everybody was chomping at the bit when Angela said that. Portia's like, does she have Tourette's or something? Why is she blurting out her business like that? So now we cut to Phaedra's confessional and she says that she believes that all marriages are hard. And I said, well, Phaedra, I'm not surprised that you feel that way because let's take a look at who you married. You didn't marry a man who wanted to be a husband. And did he have a job? So they bring out a cake for Angela's anniversary and Angela is super touched. And she's like, oh my gosh, thank you guys so much. So then she says that this kind of sisterhood is what she likes. Now, did anybody catch that shade? I think Phaedra or Portia said, I hope it all works out. I said, my God. And Portia could not wait to throw that shade because she said, he doesn't wear his ring, you're here on your anniversary, and there's a phantom baby. Just too much. I said, Angela, you should have never said anything about Charles not wearing his ring. So now they leave the restaurant and Brit points out that nothing has been resolved when it comes to the issues between her and Portia and her and Shamea. So we see them back in the Sprinter van on their way to the hotel, and Phaedra makes a great point. She says, look, rule of thumb, at this level, never give anything less than $1,000. That's it, that's all. And I agree with Phaedra. So Brit was not trying to argue with Phaedra. She says, well, that's fine, but I'm mad at Portia saying that I don't invite her to my house when she hasn't invited me anywhere. So now Brit goes on to say that she feels like she's on the hot seat. And Phaedra says, Brit, you're not on the hot seat. You're putting yourself on the hot seat. When you're joining a friendship group, you have to make yourself friendly. So Brit's still throwing herself a pity party and she's like, well, I feel like I have to be more fake then. And Phaedra says it's not about being fake. It's about being friendly. If you have somebody over your house, make sure to have some charcuterie and some champagne for them. And I said, say that again, because don't invite anybody to your house and you don't have any food for them. So I'm not going to hold you. These last 5 minutes of this episode were extremely emotional. I was crying. I had to watch this episode twice to get all my notes down, and I cried both times. I have a real soft spot for sick children. Hearing about what happened with Shiloh, seeing Shamea break down like that, I was sobbing. I will say, when they go back to the villa and Shamea is just crying, they're all comforting her, and Brit kneels down and she's like, Shamea, I got you, girl. Even though we're fighting, I love you. And she's going on and on and on. Brit, I'm sorry. This felt so insincere. It felt so fake. It felt like you wanted attention. You wanted a moment. The way Drew was staring at you in disgust, like, girl, stop. And I said, Brit, all you need to do in this moment is sit there, give Shamea a hug, and just be quiet. And then closing out the episode with Brit pouring up shots and then getting naked. I said, okay, Brit, you just wanted attention because the moment did not call for that. Just in my humble opinion, I feel like it didn't feel sincere. It just felt like, what can I do to make this all about me? And I will say, shout out to everybody else in the group because the way they all rallied around Shamea was touching. It was really nice to feel that love surrounding Shamea. But Brit, in my opinion, was doing way too much and I just wasn't buying it. It felt really phony to me. So now we open up episode 15 with all the women talking about what went down last night. After Shamea felt better, it turned into Housewives Gone Wild. And Phaedra's joking about how she got Cynthia pregnant, Cynthia got her pregnant. And I have to say, it's always nice to see them get along and have a good time. Because too many times these trips feel like they're just there to fight. So now we cut to Drew and Angela talking about last night. Drew says that last night finally felt like a vacation. They were actually having fun, getting along, drinking, turning up. It felt good. And Angela agrees. She says that she didn't think it was possible with all the friction in the past with this group. And now Angela brings up Brit's antics when she was comforting Shamea. So she says, I understand that Brit was coming from a place of love, but I made the mistake of looking at your face, Drew, and your facial expressions last night took me out. So Drew's like, well, girl, what did I do? You know, I'm just saying. And I said, Drew's facial expressions while Brit was carrying on like that, I felt the same exact way. I was not amused in the least bit. And Drew says, and they call me the actress. Meanwhile, Brit has me beat. She gave a round of applause performance. And Drew, that's exactly what that was, a performance. I didn't buy a lick of all that. I got you and we're sisters and I love you and, you know, I got your back. It just sounded so fake. Now, when Drew imitated Brit, when I tell y'all I fell out, I said, Drew, please leave us alone. Because it was spot on. Because Brit was giving us pure theatrics. It was giving stage play realness. So since they're on the topic of Brit, Drew brings up how at last night's dinner, Kelli didn't even have Brit's back. So one thing about it, Miss Angela is going to always point out how somebody's friendship is crumbling. She says that she's also noticed the friction between Brit and Kelli, and she says that Kelli is the same girl who jumped down her throat when her and Brit got into it, and now Kelli is silent. And we all know why that is. I think that Kelli is bouncing around from housewife to housewife. She wants to make sure that she aligns herself with who she feels is the big fish on this show. And she feels like Brit can't help her out, so it's shout out to everybody, I have fun.
Oh! Shout out to everybody, I had fun. I gotta be good.
Kelli feels like she's hit the lottery being with the wealthiest woman in this group, and that is Shamea. And now she has no use for Miss Brit. So now we jump on over to Shamea. Shamea's in her room and she's on FaceTime with her mom. So of course she's telling her mom how she had a rough night last night, hearing the news about Shiloh. She says, Mom, I had a complete meltdown. And Shamea's mom is like, honey, I totally get it. I understand. Because when I went to check on Shiloh today, when I walked down the hallway, it was freezing. The nurse had no blanket on her. When I picked her up, her body was so cold, she was shaking. It took an hour to heat her body up. When I tell y'all, I cannot imagine having a sick child and I have hired a nurse to care for her 24/7. The fact that this nurse dropped the ball so severely, absolutely not. Like my heart just broke. And then Shamea going on and telling us about all the baby's ailments, like my heart really broke in half. Again, it's really hard for me to hear about sick children. Like I just get very emotional and I really feel for Shamea because that's a lot to deal with. And I just really pray that Shiloh's health is restored and I hope that going forward, there are no more mishaps like that. So now we cut to Portia and Cynthia in Portia's room, and Portia is showing Cynthia the hat that she's going to wear later on today. Now, when I tell y'all everything, I said, oh, that is a hat. I love a good dramatic beach hat. I said, oh, Portia, you did that. 8 down. So now Cynthia wants to know if there are any updates on Shamea's baby, and Portia says, yes, baby Shiloh is good. So Cynthia's like, oh my gosh, thank you, Jesus. I'm so happy to hear that. And I was happy to hear that too.
Thank you, God. Thank you. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus.
So there's a knock on the door and it's Phaedra. So they sit down to gossip and Phaedra brings up last night. She says, oh, last night was so crazy, you know, with shot o'clock and all that stuff. And now she brings up Angela. She goes on to say that Angela gives her school teacher vibes and she was asking so many questions like Barbara Walters. I said, Phaedra, you just don't like this lady for whatever reason. You find a way to throw shade her way every chance you get, and I'm not understanding it. Like I said earlier, it's giving that you have a crush on Charles and you're jealous of Angela. It's just not adding up. You have found a way to throw shots at her since you came back on the show. I don't get school teacher or stern vibes from Angela. Angela has been fun. She's been messy. She's been quick on her feet, shady, witty. The body is snatched. Like, girl, what waste? I don't get school teacher or rigid at all. When you first joined the show, you were giving us very judgmental, frumpy, and now that you transformed into the IG baddie of your dreams, now you want to act like you were always so fun, zipping it and zooing it, when that was not you when you first joined the show. You gave us old lady vibes 15 years ago. So I'm not understanding the constant shade towards Angela about her being old looking and school teacher, bookworm, rigid, strict vibes. So now Phaedra brings up the whole mess between Shamea and Brit, and she says, what's going on with this whole donation thing? And in Atlanta, everybody drives a Rolls Royce. That's the African starter kit, a Rolls Royce, an AP bust down, and some Ferragamos. The way I screamed, I said, it definitely feels like in Atlanta, everybody in that city has a Rolls and an AP bust down, like she said.
Bling, bling, bling. Bitches is mad.
So Phaedra goes on to say that Atlanta is so scammy, they had to turn into a cashless city. And then she says that there's way more tricking than treating. So here's where things get interesting. Phaedra says, well, I have some tea. And she shares that she heard from the grapevine that Kelli no longer wants Brit to use her glam squad anymore. And Portia and Cynthia are shocked. Portia's like, oh, okay, so now we have some drama. So Portia's like, I think it's so funny though, because on my birthday trip in Nashville, they were dressed in the same outfit like Ren and Stimpy. I said, not Ren and Stimpy. I was screaming. I said, that show was so perverted. Like, why was that even a kid's show? That and Rocco's Modern Life were both adult cartoons, if you ask me. So they all point out how Kelli was silent while Brit was getting berated last night about her lack of donations. And Cynthia points out that Kelli did not say a word. Now, did anybody else find it a bit ironic when Portia said that it feels like jealousy because that's the only spirit that could cause all this drama? And I said, well, isn't that funny? Because the folks feel like there's some jealousy when it comes to you and Shamea, and why you guys have drama as well. So you guys are two sides of the same coin, but I digress. But to just pause for a minute, I am giving Kelli a side eye because she was so adamant that Brit used her glam team, and now all of a sudden you're mad and you feel a type of way. Now, I did watch the after show. I watched how Brit said that she does think that Kelli felt away because Kelli thought that she looked too good and she was annoyed. So if that is the case, then yeah, that is giving jealousy. And I have to say, Kelli does herself no favors switching up on people so quickly, because we've seen her jump from person to person, and now she's landed on Shamea as Shamea's new best friend. It's all very interesting. I think that Kelli is somebody where you might have to keep an eye out on her. She's always looking for the shiniest package, in my opinion. So now we jump on over to Brit and Kelli, and they're talking about last night. Kelli's asking Brit how she's feeling, and Brit says that she has mixed emotions. She felt some different energy from Kelli, and she says it was weird because I thought that we were good. Now, I'm not gonna hold you guys. I don't have too much to say about this because we know that Brit has skipped the reunion. So knowing that there is no resolution to be had regarding Brit and Kelli's friendship, what's the point of even talking about this? But Brit goes on to say that she viewed Kelli as a sister and now it's unfortunate. And then she says, Kelli, don't make me look like I'm a cheap bitch in front of the group. Now, Brit, let me stop you. Nobody has made you look any way. You did that to yourself. Hosting an event with no food, that's cheap. Don't blame anybody else for your cheap and stingy behaviors. Now, was it petty of Kelli and Shamea to shame you and shade you at that dinner table the night before? Yes. But when it comes to being looked at as cheap, you did that to yourself. So Kelli's justifying what happened, and she says, well, Shamea just wanted you to show up a bit more. Then Kelli goes on to say that I just want my friend to show up in her purpose. So now Brit makes an interesting comment and she says, it's okay for it to just be Kelli sometimes. I feel like you use your whole team as a shield. So now we cut to Brit's confessional and she says, you're not mad about donations, sweetie. Let's tell the people why you're really mad at me. So now we cut to Kelli's confessional and Kelli says, I think it's really strange that she's trying to throw shade at my entourage when she wants my entourage. So now Kelli reveals that Brit had a meeting with her entire Glam squad at her house behind her back. And now we find out from Brit's end that Kelli told her Glam team that they can't work with her anymore. So now we cut back to Kelli saying that she was cool with extending her Glam squad to Brit until Brit found her own Glam squad. And then she goes on to say, it's like, damn, do you want my OBGYN too? And I said, Kelli, girl, why are you so pressed about Brit using your Glam squad now? You guys both look good, so what's the issue? It's not like she's asking you to pay for her services. If that's the case, then I could see you being annoyed, but if Brit is paying for her services, then I don't get what the issue is. And at the end of the day, you offered up your Glam squad to Brit happily. So you can't be mad now if Brit and your Glam squad have now bonded and she wants to use them and they like doing her makeup and her hair. You shouldn't have offered if you didn't mean it. And from what I'm seeing on social media, it's clear that that's officially Brit's Glam squad now, because your former stylist Paris, who we met in episode 4 or 5, he's over there throwing shade about your money being funny and Brit pays well and pays on time and you guys don't follow each other on social media anymore. So girl, you did all that for your Glam squad to now ditch you and be on Brit's team. But in all honesty, it's hard for me to care about the demise of their friendship when Brit skipped out on the reunion and we'll never get closure on what really went down and what happened. So yeah, I mean, I can only care but so much. This scene with them by the pool was cute. There's a bartender, they have food on the grill, and now we meet Randall, who happens to be the chairman of tourism. Now, this is one thirsty group of women because I feel like they were lusting over every man who came across their way. I said all they want is a man with a pulse and 2 working legs and no, I mean, I'm not trying to be funny, but the way Phaedra was all over Randall, she was like, oh, he smells like a piece of heaven, and all these men from Grenada, they have a certain je ne sais quoi, and so you have Kelli eyeing Randall. I said, my God, y'all are in need, honey, of a man, because the way y'all were salivating at every single man who happened to cross your path, my God. But now we see Shamea and Kelli talking to Randall off to the side, and Shamea is asking him about Jab Jab. And Randall says that Jab Jab is a form of protest. And now we cut to Kelli's confessional where she explains the history of Jab Jab. So she says that it's the ultimate form of self-expression and liberation because during slavery, the owners would refer to the slaves as jabs, which meant devils. And now we cut to Portia's confessional where she gives more history lessons on Jab Jab and how the people of Grenada paint themselves in this black oil and they dance and celebrate about how they beat their oppressors. So they take a shot with Randall and now Randall leaves and now we see Kelli asking for the time because she has a call in a few minutes with her divorce attorney. So now we see Drew and Kelli bonding because they're going through the same thing. And we find out that Kelli and Drew both had the same wedding anniversary. Hearing Drew say that she honestly thought that her and Ralph would be married forever, I said, really, Drew? In your interview with Carlos King, you said that Ralph was already talking about divorce when you guys lived in Chicago. That man has been giving you hell since the beginning, so please explain it to me like I'm 5 years old. How in the world did you think that y'all would be married forever? We all saw in the first episode when you guys first joined this show that y'all would be divorced soon. So now we see Kelli go back to her villa to have her call with her divorce attorney. And now we cut to Angela, Brit, I think Phaedra and Cynthia. They're off to the side. And Angela's asking Brit if she spoke to Kelli about last night. So Brit says, yeah, we spoke about it. And I told her how I felt, like she hasn't been there for me. And I said one thing about Miss Angela Oakley, Angela's gonna always get that tea, especially about a crumbling friendship in this group. So remember that gorgeous hat that Portia showed us earlier in the episode? Well, we see that she gave that hat to Shamea to wear and model for the ladies and take pictures to just boost her confidence and put a smile on her face because of all that she's going through with Shiloh. Now, I will say this was a cute moment and that was a sweet thing to do. And I have to say, in these last 2 episodes, I felt like the old Portia was coming back. The Portia that used to be enjoyable and fun. Because I love seeing her and Shamea have their silly moments together. Portia comforting her friend when she was sad, then giving her the hat. Like, I enjoyed that. So now we cut to Kelli on the phone with her divorce attorney, and she's pretty much telling us the same old thing about how her ex is making things so hard for her, and this divorce has been the hardest thing ever. And then she says that she tries to keep it all together despite being overwhelmed because she never wants her kids to feel the true gravity of what they're actually going through. Now, Kelli, I really hope that you were able to free yourself from this bum immediately because my heart hurts for you. And another cautionary tale of why you need to be so selective of who you get with. Because the fact that her ex-husband is really pulling out all the stops to make her life miserable, and then he's a deadbeat on top of that, a mess. So now we see all the ladies getting ready for Jab Jab, and I just have a quick question. If you are going to be painting yourself from head to toe in black oil that's hard to get off, why are you putting on your good jewelry? I think it was Portia or maybe Shamea who was putting on their Cartier bracelet. I said, girl, take that off, put it in the safe, because you don't want your good stuff getting ruined. And then when Shamea said, oh, my luggage came in, I'm gonna wear my Chanel boots, they were like, girl, your boots will be ruined. I said, Shamea, if you don't get a cheap pair of shoes and put them on your feet, because I don't know why you're even going to risk ruining your good Chanel boots. Does that make sense to you, sis? So they get to Jab Jab, and when I tell you I wanna go, it looks so lit. Everybody's in this black oil. They're dancing, twerking. Shots are being poured. I said, oh yeah, I need parts. I need to go. This is one of the few times where everybody was getting along, and I need more moments like this because I do enjoy seeing the women having fun and enjoying themselves. When they got on that truck and they were all dancing, Portia was twerking on that guy. Then that same man picked Phaedra up, laid her out on the table. I said, oh, okay. I was surprised that Portia did not take that man back to the villa because the way they were grinding on each other, they were, he was touching all over her. I said, oh, okay, Portia. I said, all right, girl.
Did I say I didn't want to date? Was that me? When at Jab Jab? No! I don't know if I had these sweaty, tarred men hunching all over me, and I got a whole man back at Lake Bailey.
So now it's the next morning, and we see all these towels with black oil because we know that it took at least 3 hours to get that oil off of them. So we see them all packing up, and now they have one last breakfast before they leave. So now Cynthia's asking Brit and Phaedra how long did it take them to get all that oil off of their bodies, and Phaedra's like, when you have a baby and the midwife comes to clean you and give you a bath, that's what Brit did to me. And Brit's like, oh yeah, girl, I scrubbed her back, I told her to spread her cheeks so I could get all up in there. And Phaedra says that Brit got into every crevice of her body. So now Kelli's asking them what was their favorite part of last night, and Drew says that last night was a complete vibe, the energy, she had a great time. So now Drew goes on to ask Kelli about her phone call with her attorney. She's like, how did it go? Are you ready for next week? So Kelli says that she's actually dreading going back home because she's not ready to face her reality. And then she says when she got off the phone with her attorney, the crystal broke, and a crystal breaking symbolizes the end of a relationship. So now Portia comes out to join them, and she says that she's still lit from last night. Between jab, jab, the waterfall, bonding with the women, is just what the doctor ordered, because when she first came on the trip, her heart was heavy. And I said, well, Portia, I'm happy to hear that, because I like seeing a happy and fun Portia versus seeing a mean, spiteful, gaslighting Portia. So I'm happy that you're in better spirits, because again, it has not been fun watching you pick at Drew for 13 episodes straight, being nasty for no reason. So now we see Kelli saying that she needs to throw that crystal in the water. So she gets up to do so. Everybody else gets up to cheer her on. And now we fast forward to 72 hours later, and all hell has broken loose. So we see a clip of Shamea asking Kelli about her divorce, and Kelli says, I'm still not divorced, and he just went to jail today. I said, oh my gosh, Kelli, who did you marry? And then we see Angela asking Kelli if her and Brit have talked since Grenada, and Kelli says, nope, we haven't talked since the trip. And now we cut to Brit talking to Portia and Cynthia, and Brit says that they haven't spoken since Grenada, and on top of that, she saw some text messages between Portia and Kelli. So pretty much their friendship is over. So now we cut to Phaedra calling up Portia, Cynthia, and Brit, and she's telling them some tea about how there was some man who pretty much outed Angela about how Charles is cheating on her. I said, is anybody surprised that Phaedra's coming in with some bad news about Angela and Charles? Phaedra has been gunning for Angela since she got back on this show. And I really hope that Angela reads Phaedra for filth at this reunion. But we cut right back to Kelli throwing the crystal in the water, and now they all leave to go to the airport, and that's the end of the episode. Now guys, these episodes were cute, but I am looking forward to this season being wrapped up, and I do want to get to the reunion. I'm just curious to see how this reunion works without two key players being at that reunion. But y'all, that was my double recap. I hope you guys enjoy. Thank you all for your patience while I was across the pond. But y'all already know what to do. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all later. Bye.